Welcome, everyone, to the CRM MVP podcast, episode number 84. I haven't talked to you in a month. I miss you guys, but it's so glad to have you back and, see your smiling faces while you're listening to this and listening to my voice. This episode is going to be interesting. I typically have kind of a subject for the episode, something I want to focus on, but I felt like, I owe you like an update, and I want to talk about, what happened over the last month. Like, a lot of things have changed over the last month, so I want to talk about a few different things. So this episode is going to be kind of all over the place with topics and things that might not be related one with the other or whatever it is. This is just a we can catch up. This is a time that we can, use to get to know each other a little better. So I want to talk about something that I didn't, make public a few weeks ago, and I had, my own reasons for that, and maybe I'll get into that into the episode. Obviously, this doesn't have an actual script that I'm going to follow or anything like that. I just want to talk for a while. As you know, I like talking, so that's what this episode is going to be about. And the first thing I want to mention, by the way, is I loved the last episode of the podcast. And when I have other hosts, one of the things that a lot of people can believe or don't know about this show is that I spend zero time editing. Like, I want you guys to hear, me or whoever the host is, like if it was a conversation. Like if I'm delivering a session at an event, like a summit or whatever, I don't have time. I cannot just pause live on my presentation and go back and edit it to make it sound better or to say things differently. Like, if I say that, I never use this feature and the reasons why or whatever, I cannot go back and take it back. And I feel that the podcast should be the same way. I feel that this show should be the same way. So whenever you hear my voice, I do not edit anything. I don't edit any ums and ahs or whatever like other shows do. I don't do that. You hear my voice in real time, no edits, never. Like, I don't remember the last time I edited what I call the inside of the episode. Like, obviously, there is some noise as I'm setting up the chair and all of that when I start recording, right? I do cut that off, like the beginning of the show. I don't play the music and start talking and everything is timed perfectly. I do that. But the inside of the show, like from the time I say, welcome to the CRM MVP podcast, all the way to the end, I edit 0% of that. And because of that, when I have another host, like Lisa, for example, Lisa Crosby, who hosted the last episode 83. If you haven't listened to that, I want you to pause this thing and go back and listen to that, because Lisa did a great job talking about kind of her experience as an MVP. She hasn't been an MVP for even a year at this point. I think it's been 7 months or 8 months or something like that. And she talked about her experience as an MVP and also provided a bunch of best practices and recommendations and advice to those of you who want to become MVP. So if you haven't listened to that, I want you guys to go back and tune into that. So I received the episode from Lisa. Obviously, we talked about it ahead of time. I asked her if she wanted to host an episode, and, she mentioned that this is a topic that she's passionate about and she wants to talk about it. I said, go for it. I get her episode. I literally just posted on the feed for it to be released on the date that, as you know, every episode is released every 2 weeks. So whenever her episode is released, that's when I listen to it. I don't listen to it, because I don't edit it. I don't listen to it ahead of time. I don't want any spoilers. I want to listen to it with everyone. So I don't know if I should have disclosed that, because now I feel like anyone else who wants to host the show can say any outrageous thing and I'm going to miss it. It's going to be too late. By the time it's out, and I'm going to start getting emails and questions about the show might be over if I let someone else host it, because I don't listen to it. But obviously the people that have hosted the show in the past, and I think we're up to around 10 so far, a number of hosts that have hosted this show before, I fully trust them, right? That's why they get to be hosts on the show. And fully trust them. So I listened to the episode exactly with you guys, and it was excellent. Like, she did a great job. I wouldn't be surprised if she's back hosting the show pretty soon. Because she's very passionate about a lot of things, and she wants to talk about them, and I love to listen to Lisa talk about anything, really. So, yeah, if she wants to host again, this is it. You're always welcome. Lisa and obviously other MVPs as well are always welcome to host. I know you guys want to hear from them as well, so I appreciate that approach. But this week, in this episode, I wanted to talk to you about kind of all of the changes that have happened over the last month, personally and professionally, in regards to what Microsoft has done and announced. And I'm recording this essentially 12 hours before I release the episode. I wanted to wait till the end because I was hoping that one of the things that I'm going to disclose in this episode was live. And it will be the last thing I talk about on the show. I have it till the end because I'm giving it a chance for it to become live. And I'll get a little bit more into that later on. It will make more sense, I promise. But it will be, kind of an announcement, like an announcement of something that I've collaborated with somebody and I wanted to talk about on the show as well. But the first thing I want to talk about is kind of a personal thing. Back in July 3rd, which was, I guess, 22 days now, I was diagnosed with coronavirus. So I tested positive for coronavirus. And, I was pretty bad. I mean, I think that in the spectrum of coronavirus, if we consider, let's say, number one, being the non-symptomatic, like you have it, but you don't have any symptoms, you don't have any fever or anything like that. And 10 being death, meaning like you got it really bad and you died from it. I think I was like 8. Or maybe I'm exaggerating. Maybe like 7. I was whatever level it is before you get intubated. Let's just put it that way. Before you get into a respirator. Because I ended up in the hospital twice with oxygen. I was hooked into machines, like both my arms. I couldn't work. I couldn't even use my phone. It was pretty bad. It was to the point that, I was kind of contemplating like what I've done in my life and what I've achieved in my life, and thinking whether I had a good life or not to be 37, which is, how old I am. And, it was that bad. And, that's why I was out. I asked Lisa to host the last episode, but she did so good that I want her back like immediately. And, again, I didn't want to make this a public thing because I never really wanted to use the fact that I was, coronavirus positive. And till today, as far as I know, I am the only business application MVP that has tested positive for coronavirus, which is good because I don't want anyone else to go through what I went through. But I just didn't want to, use coronavirus as a platform or something for me to get more followers or people that would be concerned about me. Like, I feel that there are so many problems out there in the world that we have to be concerned about, rather than whether, I'm finally able to breathe a little bit. So I just didn't want to use it for my own advantage to get more followers or subscribers on YouTube or anything like that. So I decided not to make it public. But now that it's over, now that I'm alive and I'm able to talk and I'm back to normal, I wanted to, share that in hopes that if you listen to this, even if you're listening to this while you're struggling with coronavirus or wondering if you have it and all of that, if I can be of any help, if, I realize, and especially when I share with the other MVPs, which I shared immediately after I was tested, after I tested positive, everyone on the MVP community, besides being supportive, was kind of like, wow, like in shock because they had never known anyone who had it, like personally. They've heard like, oh, somebody's, cousin's friend, had it or something like that, but no one really had that firsthand experience. Like, oh, this is somebody who I've hung out with, I know, and they have it. So I've been, trying to answer a lot of questions about what it was about. I host another podcast called Dive Talk. It's about scuba diving. It has nothing to do with dynamics, but the last episode of Dive Talk, which is I think it's titled like "This is why we've been gone for a month." I go into a lot more detail about it. So if you want like a breakdown of like a day by day of what happened and how bad it was, I think that will be a good show to tune into. If you're interested, you don't have to subscribe if you don't scuba dive. It will be boring because it's just me and Woody, my my instructor, just talking about scuba diving pretty much. But at least the first like 10, 15 minutes, whatever it is, if you want a more detail, just for curiosity, not because it's me, but because you want to learn what happens to somebody that gets coronavirus just from someone who actually got it, that would be something interesting to listen to. I don't want to spend 30 minutes talking about that again. Again, if you're interested, you can go listen to that. So again, the show is called Dive Talk. And and see if you can get any answers from that. But if you have any questions, obviously, I'm happy to answer them. If you want to reach out to me on Twitter or our email address, info@crmmvppodcast.com, I'm happy to answer those. There's several people in the industry that, learn about this, and they were very, very supportive. It's just too hard to thank everybody. I personally couldn't believe it, kind of the extent that people went through, to support me during those days. And I was out for 2 weeks, like really bad. I had people that are, I guess you can consider them competitors, meaning they are also partners that, we kind of, we could end up competing in the same deals, although I've never competed with them on any project or anything like that, who reach out and said, look, if you're falling behind on work or anything like that, we're willing to do it for free. Like, just tell me what is it, and we're willing to support you in any way we can. So using their talent to do that, I was blown away by that. I had people that reached out and said, is there, I know that we haven't really interacted a whole lot, but if you need anything, I'm happy to ship it to you, deliver it by your house. People that live 2.5 hours away, they will be like, I'm happy to come and bring you stuff if you need it, because it was me and my wife. We were both sick. Neither one of us could go out or anything like that. So, I was overwhelmed with the support of the community, Dynamics community, and also, my regular friends and other people that I know, diving or whatever it is. So I was really pleased with that, but I wanted to share with you because I'm okay. I'm fine. I'm back to 100%. Just me talking and, doing dynamics just like always. So nothing to be worried about. No lasting effects or anything like that. It was rough, but I recovered. So it's actually a good story. Now I am immune, I guess. Well, we don't know 100%, but hopefully that's the case, at least for a few months. So I'm still taking measures, though. I'm still wearing a mask. I'm still doing all of that because I don't want to freak people out. Go places without a mask just because I'm, quote unquote, immune to the disease, and then, freak them out because I'm not wearing a mask. So I'm still respecting social distancing and wearing masks and all of that and staying home as well. But it's good to know that I have, the antibodies that, if something happens again, if we are able to get coronavirus again for a second time, then hopefully my antibodies will do something and I won't end in the hospital. So we'll see how that goes. We'll keep an eye on that. But for now, I'm back 100%. We're good. And guess also what was back? Inspire was back this week. For those of you who are unfamiliar with Inspire, it's been through a few name changes. I've been to Inspire, I think 3 times. When before it was called Inspire, which was called the World Partner Conference, and once it was renamed to Inspire. I like Inspire for a couple of reasons. Number one, because everyone who goes there is a partner, essentially. So we're all kind of going through the same issues and successes and failures, and we're all struggling with the same. I've personally met, with a lot of partners during the World Partner Conference and Inspire that wanted nothing but help. They because I'm a small company, right? Elevate Solutions is a small practice. A lot of these partners were essentially in my place, 5 years ago or 8 years ago or whatever it was. And they were like, oh, let me introduce you to somebody at Microsoft who can help you. Let me introduce you to such and such who can help you. So I always appreciated that. Also, over the last few years, Inspire or the World Partner Conference has been in parallel with a Microsoft event, which is for employees. It's called Tech Ready, I believe, or something like that. And so you have thousands and thousands of Microsoft employees, the people that you typically interact with when it comes to opening tickets or stuff like that, or even the engineers or the people that work on the product team. They all go to this event. So in one place, you have all these partners and all these Microsoft people attending the event, and it gets pretty big. The times that I've been has been in Vegas. I think it's been running in Vegas for like 3 years in a row or something, but not this year. It was virtual, but it's been in Vegas, and I believe the last time I attended, there were over 40,000 people there. Combined between the two conferences. So what happens then is you get pretty awesome parties and concerts, right? So typically we have, it's a good artist. Like when we go to one of the conferences or whatever it is, the Microsoft ones. But I think the last time I went, Bruno Mars was the show, right? Of the event, which is a pretty class A artist, right? That a lot of people want to see. So it's a pretty awesome conference, but because it's geared towards partners, and I'm talking about all partners, there's not a whole lot of dynamic stuff. There's not a whole lot of business application stuff. There will be a couple of announcements there, but it's typically not dynamics, right? The Business Application Summit is the event where you'll see those announcements made. And until recently, sometimes the user group summits, we would get some announcements in there, but for the most part, the dynamics announcements will be coming out of the Business Application Summit. So that is the event. MBAS, Microsoft Business Application Summit, is the event where we need to kind of keep our ears open and our eyes open, right, to see what comes out of it, because that is the event where Microsoft will kind of introduce the things they have been working on for the past year or multiple years in some cases. However, one thing was announced during Inspired that is related to business applications. You guys probably heard of it. It's called Dataflex, right? It's kind of an interesting name. From what I understand, there's also something out there already called Dataflex, which kind of gave me PTSD from the SkyDrive to OneDrive, days where they had to rename the product. So I don't know if Dataflex as a name will stay around. We were talking about this. I was talking about this with other MVPs who, they were doing extensive research about Dataflex to see what they found. And when you Google or Bing anything about Dataflex, it seems like the other company that already has Dataflex and has had it for years is what keeps popping up. So it's interesting. Anyone who heard that announcement and goes to a browser or a search engine, and starts typing Dataflex, they're not going to find any Microsoft stuff. So I don't know how that's going to work or if the name's going to stick around. But I do want to talk about the announcement, and I do want to talk about what it is. Now, obviously, this thing was announced this week, days ago, so nobody's an expert on it. We're all just focused on, what has been disclosed by Microsoft. And by the way, typically, when new functionality comes out, like even at MBAS, typically MVPs will know ahead of time that things are coming. And the idea is that through podcasts and YouTube and blog posts or whatever, we are able to not only answer questions from the community, because the community knows MVPs and other industry experts better than the Microsoft team internally, but also we're able to add that kind of business side of it, right? How will a business use this functionality? Because the people that work at Microsoft in the product team are geniuses. Like, they're amazing at what they do, but because they're so good at what they do, which is essentially creating the products that we use to solve business challenges, they don't have the opportunity to actually implement those products at customers. Now, they do talk to customers. They do, interact, especially with the largest customers and whatnot, and they hear what they have to say. They hear their feedback and things like that. And I believe that that's probably why we still have Dynamics 365 on premise, because I feel that some of the biggest customers are still on that platform, and they're, kind of keeping it alive, let's just say. I don't know this for a fact. I'm just guessing. But Microsoft does talk to customers, but they don't implement it for those customers. Those customers get it implemented by themselves or with a partner or whatever. Microsoft doesn't do that part of it. Although Microsoft has MCS, which stands for Microsoft Consulting Services, and they do implement Dynamics for large organizations in some cases, or in a lot of cases. That's who they work with. Companies that are humongous, and they're like, look, we're only going to sign if Microsoft is the one implementing it. But as far as I understand, MCS, even though it has Microsoft in the name, for Microsoft Consulting Services, works separately from the product team. They don't work together. It's not the same team. They're like completely different, companies, let's just say, or divisions. So the people working in the product team are not part of the MCS team. They're not implementing Dynamics for a living. And because of that, they rely on experts like MVPs and like other industry experts, future MVPs, let's just say, to essentially, add our 2 cents and talk about how will these functionality apply to a business, right? And talk about in real terms. Like, I had a customer that had this problem, and I think this solution will fix it. So, right off the bat, Dataflex. Let's ignore the name. Like I said, I think that name probably will change, or I don't know what will happen with it. I feel that Dataflex is like an option that I add to like a device that I bought. Like, yeah, I need that iPad, and can you please add Dataflex? Add the Dataflex option to it. Or perhaps you buy a brand new truck, or a brand new car. Like, oh my God, that Mercedes is awesome. And guess what? The 2020 model comes with Dataflex. What? That's how I feel about it. It's kind of an interesting name. But the point is, there's two kind of flavors of Dataflex. Well, let's talk about what Dataflex is, or at least when people talk about Dataflex, what it is. So Dataflex, it's a new offering, an extra service, an extra benefit to those organizations that are using Microsoft Teams. All right. So if you have Microsoft Teams, you'll have access to Dataflex. Let's just put it that simple. Now, what is Dataflex? Dataflex, just to make it easy for those of you who work with Dynamics and the Power Platform, is a subset of functionality from CDS. So if you have been working with CDS, creating Canvas apps and model-driven apps, and if you're working with Dynamics 365, which is essentially massive, model-driven applications built on top of CDS, that database, Dataflex is a simplified or a light version of CDS. All right. So it gives you some of the capabilities, like, for example, you can create Canvas apps with it. You can create model-driven apps with it. But it's a subset of functionality. Now, what happens if you want all of the functionality? All right. If you want all of the functionality, you can then upgrade to something called Dataflex Pro. It reminds me of Power BI and Power BI Pro, right? And the price to use Dataflex Pro is the exact same, at least till now, the exact same as CDS. How is CDS or Power Apps licensed? You either pay $10 a month per user per app. So they use one app. They have access to one app, and that can be one Canvas app, one model-driven app, one Power Portal, right? Only one, you pay $10 a month, or you can pay $40 a month, so that user can access an unlimited amount of apps. If you only need access to 2 apps, you can pay $20, so you can pay $10 per app, or once you get to 4, I guess, you can just pay $40 and have unlimited access to the apps. And obviously, this is not a licensing episode. I'm not going to go into like, all the details about what entities are included and not included, what can you read only versus read and write. Like, no. Like that's a whole nother episode. We've done licensing episodes before. I think we've done 2 of them. If you go back and look at the previous episodes, you'll find them. So I don't want to get into that. But the point is that if you want more features, the features that are missing from your reduced CDS, functionality, aka Dataflex, you can pay Pro. You can pay to go Pro, and then you'll have access to all of them. Now, let's talk about what are the things that are missing from Dataflex, or that are missing in Dataflex from Dataflex Pro. All right. So if you're following Dataflex Pro, full on CDS, what you're used to today, right? That's when this reminded me to when Power Apps were introduced, and I, literally spent hours telling people, look, model-driven apps is dynamics, is the same thing, right? The thing that you've been working with, which is called the app designer that allows you to create apps, those are model-driven apps, because people are like, oh, I don't know anything about Power Apps. No, you know a lot about Power Apps because you've been working with Power Apps called Dynamics 365 Apps. It's just a different name. So if you don't think you know a lot about Dataflex Pro, you're wrong. You know a lot about it if you've been working with CDS, for the last whatever many, months or years since it was introduced. So if you've been creating applications on top of CDS and working with forms and views and entities and dashboards and all that stuff, and Flow or Power Automate and all of that, then you're already an expert in Dataflex Pro. That's cool, right? Dataflex, which is CDS Lite or CDS Mini, or I'm gonna call it CDS Mini. I feel like that's a cool flavor. Hopefully Microsoft will take me up on that. CDS Mini or Dataflex comes with a few limitations. So I want to talk about that. Number 1, whatever application you create only can be accessed through Microsoft Teams. That is a big limitation. All right. So the way it works is if you have a license to Microsoft Teams, you will have license to Dataflex and the apps that can be created on top of Dataflex. So I want you guys to think about Dataflex or CDS Mini as, an application or a solution or an offering that everything you do in it has to be done through Microsoft Teams. Like creating the apps themselves has to be done through Microsoft Teams. And Microsoft showed a couple of screenshots in which the Power Apps Maker, for example, is now available inside of Microsoft Teams. So you don't have to go to make.powerapps.com or anything like that. Inside of Microsoft Teams, there will be a section where if you have the right permissions, I assume, and the right licensing details, or I don't know how that works yet because they haven't shared how that works yet, you will be able to go into a section within Microsoft Teams to be able to create or make Power Apps, Canvas, or model-driven, which is pretty cool. So you go through Microsoft Teams, create your app. The apps can only be accessed through Microsoft Teams. And by the way, they mentioned that the apps will work on mobile devices, but through the Microsoft Teams app, not through the Power Apps player or like the Dynamics 365 app, which is what we use to play model-driven apps. Now they're going to be embedded or accessible, I don't know, through the Microsoft Teams app. So if you have a device that can have the Microsoft Teams app, then you will be able to access these apps, these model-driven and Canvas apps created in Dataflex. Interesting. I want to see that because I have an iPhone and my Microsoft Teams app it's not my most stable app in the iPhone. Let's just say it that way. I have all kinds of issues with it. I struggle to switch teams. Like I'm a member of like 5 or 6 different teams. Some of our customers invite me to their teams and stuff, and I have all kinds of issues with it. I don't know if I have to uninstall it and reinstall it. I don't know what's going on, but I personally have some issues, although I have a bunch of issues with my phone, to be honest. I have an iPhone 10. It's ready to go. Like I've been really close to throwing it in a river, like 10 times. because it's a mess. So it's probably my phone. I don't want to blame the app. My phone is a mess. And, these apps are now going to be available through the Microsoft Teams app. That's going to be interesting. I want to see how that works. I don't know. There are some premium functions that are not going to be available. Like, for example, all of the connectors, right, that we can use in Canvas apps, in Power Automate, and CDS, essentially. Like the ability that you can create an app, for example, that can read a tweet and then that or creates a record inside a model-driven app or something like those connectors between SharePoint and different things, like all of those connectors will just not work. This is just giving you the ability to create applications, model-driven or Canvas apps, that are using a single data source, which will be a CDS database, or let's just call it a Dataflex database, or maybe just call it Dataflex. I don't know what they're going to call these databases, but you're going to have these databases, which is full of tables or entities, and those tables are full of columns or fields, and you're going to be able to relate these columns, these entities together. It's a relational database. So imagine, having an application where, let's say, you're, storing events, like conferences or maybe, what do you call it? Like road shows or whatever. Like, okay, you can have the name of the event, and then there's a child record below hosting like the speakers. And then there's another child record below hosting like the sessions or, the different sessions that you're going to have at the event and, things like that. So you can have child records and they have one-to-many and I assume many-to-many relationships. Like you will be able to have those things, but all have to be within the same database. So how's that? I don't know. It's going to be interesting. And I think that for some companies, it's going to be great. Some companies literally just want to have a list. I just want to have a list of my leads or prospects or the people who attended, the event. Like I have a customer right now that I'm working with. They have like this massive customer experience building. They just want to have a list, for example, or they have it already, but they have full dynamics, but they could just want to have a list of the people who go to the building and get to experience that customer experience. Like we just want to have a list. They have a security system at the front door, and whenever somebody comes in and checks in that they're coming into the building, we just want to drop them on a list and maybe be able to relate them to an opportunity or something like that. Cool. Dataflex will work for that because you have only one data source, assuming that the security system is also running kind of a Dataflex app, and they're all dumping their data in the same database, Dataflex base. I don't know what they're going to call it. I'm getting confused. But assuming that all of the data ends up in the same place, you could potentially use Microsoft Teams to access those apps. And by those apps, I mean by accessing the data. Now, one of the things that I am super concerned about and mindful about when it comes to projects is security. Security is going to be interesting because it's all going to be based on Teams. Like what part of it, when you create an app, right? And you say this app should be applicable to this Microsoft team. Let's just say the team is called, I don't know, sales or whatever. Then everyone in sales has access to the app. So I don't know how you will be able to apply security, like at least the way we do security today, which is based on an owner and maybe you have read permissions but not write permissions. Like I don't know how you will be able to do that because the information about security that they release is very, very minimal. They essentially said, look, it's if you're part of the team, you have access to the app and access to the data. Well, what does that mean? Like, what is access? Is it read-only access? Is it read and write access? Can they delete stuff? Like, I want to know more about security. I just don't know at this point. Again, this thing has been out only for a few days. So I want to learn more about it. Security will be interesting. interesting to set up. Obviously, they might be like, look, everyone in the team has read and write access. They can delete. They can do whatever they want. You don't like that? Cool. Then you can upgrade to Dataflex Pro for $10 per user, and then you can control it however you want because you'll have access to the entire security capabilities of Dynamics 365, or well, let's just call it model-driven apps. All right. Now you have access to model-driven app security, and now you can control all whatever you want. Cool. Maybe that is the case. But I want to learn more about that. I just don't know enough as of now. There might be some other things that are missing from CDS Mini or Dataflex that are available in Dataflex Pro. I don't think they have released all of the, things that might be missing. I think that it will require someone to play with it and create apps and then realize that, oh, that's interesting. So you can do that. So I know, especially with Canvas apps, which I know very minimum. Like, if there was a 1 through 10, I would say I'm like a 4 or a 5 with Canvas. So obviously the other 5 that I'm missing is the hardest 5. So I think that there's a lot when it comes to Canvas apps that perhaps might be missing. I don't know, like formulas and things like that. Perhaps Power Automate, it's also limited. Maybe you can only use functions within team. I don't really know how this is going to play out. I need to get access to it and mess with it to see. But I do believe that Microsoft Teams, I mean, I have customers that are like anti-technology. I've worked with customers in the past that have been selling something like, I remember this customer I worked with a couple of years ago. They deal with gas, like gas tanks, like oxygen and helium and stuff like that. Like that's all that, like gas tanks and providing welding, places and hospitals with the gas they need to do their job. Like that thing has been going on since like, the 30 BC or something like that. Like this has been going on forever and ever and ever. So a lot of their salespeople, the medium age is like 55 or something like that. Like they're not very computer savvy. They don't want to get into it. And those companies like that are in love with Teams. Like Microsoft has a smashing hit with Microsoft Teams. Microsoft Teams has become kind of the workplace, the hub, right, where everyone can come to and understand what's happening. Like, does anybody need help? Are there any meetings, any new files or documents that have been uploaded? When were they updated? Let's work together. Like, you can open one of those documents between two people and know exactly, especially with Excel, you know exactly what cell they're in, which is sometimes interesting because, I've done that before, and I can see, like, for example, if we're talking or if I'm talking a lot, the people who have the Excel open, they'll be doing like circles with the cells, you see their cell moving like in circles. And I'm like, okay, I'm clearly boring them. So let's move into something else. But I mean, Microsoft Teams has become an amazing hub for companies to work from, right? So the fact that we're going to have these apps that are super simple, which by the way, are the best ones to be adopted by users. The whole myth that the most complex app is the one that is going to blow the minds of the users and they're going to love it. It's just a myth, obviously. Users love simple apps. So the fact that Dataflex forces you to only be able to create simple apps, and the fact that they're going to be embedded into Microsoft Teams, I think it can be a smashing hit. Now, I want to see what kinds of apps, simple apps, because those are the ones that we're going to be forced to create, what kind of simple apps can be created that will actually provide business value to some businesses. Because there are some businesses out there, and it's not a size thing. Like, you could have 3 employees, but they have a super complex process that can connect to multiple systems and pull data and do all kinds of stuff. Even though they're a small company, of course, big companies do this too. But, if you cannot create an app they will provide or they will solve a business challenge, they would, create a business outcome for the organization, then it doesn't matter if it's simple or embedded in Microsoft Teams, it's not going to succeed. So I want to see what kinds of apps we can create to it, because if we can create compelling apps inside of Microsoft Teams, I think that will be a huge hit, because people are already familiar with Teams. And even though they might be using a model-driven app that looks like Dynamics, because they're accessing it through Teams, I think it might be easier to be adopted. I don't know. I'm excited about it. I think it's cool. I think that, especially because it's free. So that's a huge, obviously, attraction to it. And it's not free. Like, you have to have Microsoft Teams, which, I mean, in order for you to get Teams, there's several ways to do it, but most people have like Office 365, so you're paying for it. It's not 100% free, but it's cool that it has been added to the organizations that already have access to Teams. So that is great. You can build bots too, apparently, with, I guess, Power Virtual Agents or whatever it is. You'll be able to use that. But again, the whole point is, it is available through Microsoft Teams. You create the apps, access the apps, everything that has to do with the apps and the data. Everything will be done through Teams. And Teams has a huge rate of adoption out there. So this hopefully helps with, solution adoption and user adoption in some companies that are struggling with it. So we'll see where it goes. I'm excited to see it. I'm excited to test it. So hopefully Microsoft will give us access to it pretty soon and see how we can make it work. Microsoft Teams has been, difficult, at least for me, to get any like early access to anything. Like, I know that, for example, they were rolling out, and this was advertised, so this is not NDA. They were rolling out the capability of having more people. Like, if you're doing a video call, which with COVID, obviously a lot of that is happening through Microsoft Teams and other platforms like Microsoft Teams. But Microsoft Teams, I think it only could show 4 or 6 people, and they increased that number to 9, I believe, or something. So they made an increase, and man, I've been trying so hard to get one of those, tenants essentially, or one of those upgraded instances, and I'm having no luck. Obviously, when it comes to utilizing Microsoft Teams, I'm not an expert or an MVP on that or anything like that. So I don't have a pool really to be able to get those environments that have upgraded access to it. So I imagine that to be able to get access to an environment with Dataflex will be tough. I don't remember if they announced the date when this will be released publicly, meaning like you just show up to work on Monday and, oh, look, there's Dataflex. I don't know if they announced that, so I have to look into that. But I don't remember that. I just remember they announced it and they said it was coming, but I don't remember the date or anything like that. So that might be something that I need to research a little bit. But I just wanted to talk about Dataflex. I think that, a lot of people saw it. They didn't know what it was. Just remember, if you've been working with CDS, you're already a pro in Dataflex Pro because it's CDS. Dataflex Pro is CDS. And then Dataflex is CDS Mini, meaning you can do a lot of the things you can do with CDS, but the cool things, like the premium, functions such as connectors and things like that, are not available with CDS Mini or Dataflex. You have to upgrade to Dataflex Pro. All right, so that is it for Dataflex. Now I want to talk about, to kind of wrap up the episode, about one thing that is coming out. And again, I was checking to see if it was available. I guess Google doesn't work on weekends. I don't know what's going on with it, but back in episode 69, if you've been listening to the show for a while, episode 69 talked about New Year's resolutions, and I gave you some ideas. I think it was probably a top 10 episode, to be honest, where I gave you some ideas of things to do in 2020 from the Dynamics perspective. So things like, and I think I remember saying that if you do everything on the list, you'll get the MVP award. Like I said, because it will be a lot to do, right? It has, presenting in conferences. It has things like creating tools. It has things like writing blogs. It has things like answering questions in the community, recording video. Like, there's a lot of different suggestions of targets or goals, if you will, that you can hit in 2020. And I mentioned that I wanted all my listeners to pick one, at least one from the list. Maybe make your own if you want. The list was not kind of like the commandments. It wasn't like this is it. These are the only 10 things you can do, but at least to give you an idea of things that you could accomplish in 2020. If you couldn't think of something, even if you didn't like the items in the list, the idea was for you to pick one or more from the list and try to make it happen, kind of as a goal for 2020. And look, the year's still young. We're not in August yet, right? July is not over yet. So you can go back, if you haven't done this, go back and listen to episode 69, New Year's resolutions, pick one or more from the list and knock them out before the year is over. So one of the things that I mentioned, I think I mentioned this on the episode, is that I wanted to create a new tool, right? Because in 2019, working with another MVP, Clement Olivier, we created a tool for XRM Toolbox called the BPF Manager. Again, if you're not familiar with it, you can go check it out on XRM Toolbox. But essentially, it helps you manage business process flows. And I love that experience. I love working with Clement. He's a brilliant developer. Like, he's amazing, at developing for Dynamics 365 and the Power Platform. So having the opportunity to work with him was great. And by the way, when I say work with him, I mean, he does 99.9% of the work. Like, I just come up with the ideas, and these amazingly bright individuals make it happen because they're the ones that they have the know-how to do it. Like, I think I can figure it out. Like, if I dedicated months to it, like, maybe that should be my 2021, New Year's resolution, is to learn how to create a tool, and just so I can do it all myself. But man, why do it when you have the best people in the world already looking for ideas to develop? Like, some of these guys are like, I wish I could do more. I just don't have any ideas. And I'm like, well, I have plenty of ideas. Most of them are dumb, but some of them are pretty good. And in some cases, they agree with me that they are good, and they go ahead and create it. So, Clement did that in 2019. I loved it. I wanted to do something for 2020, and the opportunity presented itself a few weeks ago before COVID happened and all of that. I had an idea for a new tool, for a new release for the community. It's a free release, obviously, and it's a Google plugin. If you're familiar with Level Up, which is one of my favorite free tools in the world, essentially, it will be like that. It's a plugin that you install on your browser, so it's a user-by-user basis, but it's called PowerText, right? So PowerText is the name of the tool, and essentially what it does is that it allows you to quickly enter data or replace text based on the value that you have in a field. Now, so let me give you an example of where this came from. I was working with a customer who's using the customer service app within Dynamics 365. So they're using cases and all that stuff. And they're using it very heavily, meaning they're using cases, they're using entitlements, they're using SLAs, they're using knowledge-based articles, they're using, subject and product. Like, they're using all of case, all of the functionality in there, which is great. That's what it was created for. They're doing awesome. So one of the things that they do as part of the, the technicians or the people, the agents essentially resolving these cases is they take a lot of accurate notes. This customer prides themselves in great customer service, and as part of providing great customer service, you want to take a bunch of detailed notes. So if that customer calls again 5 days from now and they talk to another agent, that agent will know exactly what happened on the last call, and if there were multiple calls, they'll know exactly what happened on all of those different calls. So one of the things that I notice is that in the process of typing these notes, they will be typing the same information over and over and over again. Like, for example, let's just say that the products they're using, I'm just going to use cameras because I'm staring at my camera, right? I have a Sony a7 III looking right at me. Let's say that they're troubleshooting cameras, right? So they would literally enter something like Gus Gonzalez called in because his a7 III had they would enter the problem, like whatever problem is. I don't have a problem. That thing is awesome. But, had this problem, and, I resolved the ticket, or the ticket proceeded because he has this entitlement and it's under this SLA or something like that. Like, they would enter all that information, and they would have to type in the name of the customer, the name of the product the customer is calling about. They would have to enter the title of the entitlement, the title of the SLA, and in some cases enter dates as well. So it just took forever to enter all that information. So I started thinking about, is there any way that we could make it so it's like shortcuts, right? So you press a shortcut on your keyboard, and that would enter the customer name or the product that we're calling about, or the SLA or entitlement, or whatever it is. Like, any field that you have on the form, I wanted to reference with a shortcut. Now, there is no way, as far as I know, to do shortcuts with your keyboard, especially because a lot of the keys already have shortcuts. Like, you can't just replace Control P, which is print, with something else like, partner or whatever, another field in the form. So I think keyword, shortcuts, it's out of the question. I don't know if it's technically possible. It's probably technically possible, but it will be too confusing. So what we landed on is on text replacement. So here's how it works. You have a key combination for fields in the form. Let's say the customer is CCC. I'm just making something up, or #C or %C, however you want to call it, right? I would say CCC because it's easy. When you enter three C's in a row for customer, just 3 C's, it will immediately replace those 3 C's with the name of your customer, right? It will just do it immediately. And then later on, if you need to reference the product that has a problem, let's say you enter 3 P's. So PPP, bang, just enters the name of the product. So I wanted to create a solution that did that you could have shortcuts. There will be text shortcuts that when you enter that, and it could be like, %1 is something, %2 is something else, like, you could design it however you want, but the idea is to have it replaced by information inside fields inside that form, right? So for model-driven applications, it will read who the customer is in that case and replace the text with that. It will read the product inside of the product lookup, and it will replace PPP with the name of the product, things like that. So I wanted to do that, and I thought that the best way to do it was to do it with a Google plugin. So I looked for a plugin to see if there was something out there. I'm like, maybe there's something out there. There's always a rule for solution architects, which is you should always check to see if something is out there you can use before you create it. So I did that. I looked online, and I found a plugin that did something similar, but obviously doesn't work with Dynamics. It doesn't know what fields are. He just didn't know that. So I reached out. I started thinking about, what other super brilliant, smart guy out there or lady out there that I know of can help me deliver this tool. Because it was browser-based, because it was a Google plugin, I figured out that Nick Hayduke, who is a Microsoft MVP, expert in portals, which has a lot to do with browsers, obviously, would be my best bet to have someone help me out, make this a reality. So I reached out to Nick. Nick looked at it. He's like, I think this solution is pretty cool. I don't know if it's possible or not, but I'm going to give it a shot over the weekend. It was like on a Friday. He looked at it over the weekend, and I think by Monday we had a working solution. It wasn't perfect, but it did kind of my vision, or the way I envisioned this thing to work. It worked pretty good. And then Nick went back, and I found a couple bugs, nothing major. Nick went back and fixed those, and then we started thinking about, okay, what do we call this thing? And that's when we landed in Power Text. So Power Tools or Power Apps, Power BI, Power Text. That's why it's called Power Text. It's coming to the Google plugin store. It's going to be free. It has a bunch of different features, though. Like, for example, all those shortcuts, you can back them up. You can download them again because they are based on the machine, right? So you could create the shortcuts and then send them to your users, for example, and they can import them, and that way the shortcuts are created. If you're gonna do training with the shortcuts, it will be beneficial for everyone to be able to have the same shortcuts. So there is a full-on demo coming up about Power Text, how to use every feature, how to install it, how to create shortcuts, how to use it within Dynamics 365, and I will be pushing that to the CRM MVP YouTube channel. So if you're not subscribed already, which I know a lot of you are, but if you're not subscribed already, crmmvpmedia.com will take you to the YouTube channel. It's not a website, it's just a redirect to the YouTube channel. Please subscribe because this thing is coming hot. Like, hopefully I can release it this Tuesday if it's listed in Google by then. If not, it's going to be on the next Tuesday. It's going to be a 2-minute Tuesday, but is coming. So crmmvpmedia.com, that will take you to our YouTube channel. Subscribe there, hit that bell, so you're notified when it comes out, because I want you to test it. And I think it's going to help you. Now, by the way, this plugin, Power Text, works everywhere. It's not just for Dynamics. Right? If you can enter things like hashtag T could be for today. So you could be typing on a website, just any website you want. You can be in whatever, in your email, Outlook Web Access, and you will enter hashtag T, and today's date will be entered for you. So it's not exclusive to Dynamics. It works everywhere. Obviously, the real value and where it comes to me is that it can read fields from Dynamics. But again, if you enter shortcuts that are not based in Dynamics fields, but macros like today's date or your name or whatever it is. Like, for example, if you're entering an email, you can make a shortcut for your email signature. How awesome is that? It's one of the biggest problems in Dynamics. People are like, how do I add my signature? You use Power Text for that. So you could do like hashtag S or %S. And as soon as you enter that, boop, your signature is added to the bottom of the email. So it's awesome. It's free. It's for you, for the community. I hope you guys enjoy it. Give us some feedback. If you find any problems, you can reach out to Nick. If you find anything good about it, you can reach out to me and let me know what you think. But that is the announcement I wanted to make today to close this episode. Thank you. If you're still listening to this, I know that we went over a bunch of different things. Hopefully you learned some things today, about Dataflex and about, Power Text, which is our plugin coming up to the Google Store. And, if you have any questions or any comments about today's episode, you can reach us at info@crmmvppodcast.com. If you have any comments for Lisa, or if you have any comments for Nick as well, who created this tool, I'm happy to forward it to them. So if you send it to me, I'll be able to send it to them. You can, reach out to me on LinkedIn or on Twitter at Gus Gonzalez 2. But if you have any questions, any comments, any suggestions for future episodes, you can email us there, or you can drop a comment at crmmvppodcast.com. Once again, don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel, because this video is coming with a link to the tool, and it's going to be awesome. So crmmvpmedia.com. We'll see you on the next episode if I'm hosting. If not, maybe Lisa will get to host or someone else, but we'll see how it goes. Thank you so much for tuning in. We'll see you on the next one.